The mayor handed me a deed to the entire downtown district, and my father's signature was on every page. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's story is going to absolutely blow your mind, and you won't want to miss it. I was 18 years and 3 months old on my last day at Riverside Group Home. Most kids counted down the days until they aged out, but I'd been dreading this moment since my 17th birthday. Mrs. Chen, the social worker, had tried preparing me with life skills classes and budgeting workshops, but none of that changed the basic fact that I had nowhere to go, $412 in my savings account, and a duffel bag of belongings that represented my entire life. The morning started normally enough. I packed my clothes, said goodbye to the younger kids, and avoided looking at the empty bed across from mine, where my roommate Jessica had slept until she aged out 6 months earlier. I hadn't heard from her since, which told me everything I needed to know about what came next. I was carrying my bag down the stairs when Mrs. Thompson, the home's director, stopped me in the hallway. Her face had this strange expression, somewhere between confused and excited. "Maya, you have a visitor waiting in my office. The mayor wants to speak with you." The mayor. Of all the things I'd expected on my last day, a visit from Mayor Roberts wasn't on the list. Riverside was a small town in upstate New York, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, but I couldn't imagine why the mayor would care about one more foster kid leaving the system. I followed Mrs. Thompson to her office, my stomach tight with anxiety. Mayor Roberts stood when I entered, a tall woman in her early 60s with silver hair and kind eyes. She shook my hand firmly, then gestured for me to sit. "Maya, I'm so glad I caught you before you left," she said, pulling a large envelope from her briefcase. "I've been searching for you for almost 3 months. The records were difficult to track down, and the legal complications were substantial, but we finally have everything sorted out." I stared at her, completely lost. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand. Why were you searching for me?" She opened the envelope and pulled out a thick stack of documents. "Your father was Thomas Grant, correct? Thomas Andrew Grant, who died when you were 6 years old?" My breath caught. Nobody had mentioned my father's name in years. "Yes," I whispered. "How did you know that?" "Because your father owned a significant amount of property in downtown Riverside," Mayor Roberts said gently, "and according to his will, which we only recently discovered during a title search, all of it belongs to you." The words didn't make sense. My father had been a mechanic. We'd lived in a tiny apartment above the garage where he worked. When he died in the accident, there'd been nothing. No life insurance, no savings, just debts that disappeared when I entered the foster system. "There must be some mistake," I said. "My father didn't own anything. We barely got by." Mayor Roberts spread documents across Mrs. Thompson's desk, deeds, legal papers, and photographs of buildings I recognized from downtown. "Your father was more than a mechanic, Maya. He was also an investor. Starting in the early 2000s, he began purchasing properties in downtown Riverside when they were cheap and neglected. Over 12 years, he accumulated 9 commercial buildings, including the old theater, the corner pharmacy building, and several storefronts on Main Street." I looked at the papers, seeing my father's signature over and over again, that familiar scrawl I remembered from birthday cards and permission slips. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why did I spend 12 years in foster care if my father left me property? That's where it gets complicated, she said, her expression turning apologetic. When your father died, his business partner, a man named Richard Dawson, convinced the probate court that the properties were part of their joint business, not your father's personal assets. He claimed they'd had a verbal partnership agreement, and without anyone to challenge him, he took control of everything. You were 6 years old and had just entered foster care. There was no one advocating for you, no one who knew enough to fight. Anger flooded through me, hot and sharp. Someone had stolen my inheritance, stolen 12 years of my life, and I'd grown up with nothing, while this Richard Dawson profited from my father's work. So what changed? I asked, my voice harder than I intended. Why now? Richard Dawson died 8 months ago, Mayor Roberts explained. When his estate went through probate, the title company discovered irregularities in the property ownership. They found your father's original will, which explicitly left everything to you. They also found evidence that Richard had forged documents to support his partnership claim. Once we started digging, the whole fraud fell apart. She pulled out another document, this one with an official seal. A judge ruled 3 weeks ago that the properties rightfully belong to you. They've been in a trust since Richard's death, professionally managed and maintained. The businesses currently renting space in your buildings have continued operating, and the rental income has been accumulating. Maya, you're not walking out of here with nothing. You're walking out as the owner of 9 commercial properties worth approximately $2.7 million, plus almost $90,000 in accumulated rental income. The room spun. $2.7 million, $90,000. Numbers so big they didn't feel real. Mrs. Thompson gasped beside me. Oh my God, Maya! I don't understand, I said again, because my brain couldn't process what I was hearing. How do I own buildings? How does this work? Mayor Roberts smiled patiently. You own the buildings, and businesses rent space from you. The property management company has been handling everything, collecting rent, maintaining the buildings, paying property taxes. That will continue unless you decide to make changes. The accumulated income is in an account waiting for you, and the rental income going forward will be deposited monthly. You'll also need to work with an attorney and accountant to properly manage everything, but the trust has funds set aside for those expenses. She handed me a business card. This is Jennifer Walsh. She's a real estate attorney who's been overseeing the trust. She's expecting your call, and she'll walk you through everything. Maya, I know this is overwhelming, but you need to understand something important. You don't have to figure this out alone. There are professionals ready to help you, and the town is behind you. Your father was a good man who worked hard to build something for your future. It's time you got what he intended you to have. I took the card with trembling hands, still unable to fully believe this was happening. 12 years of feeling worthless, of being told I'd probably struggle my whole life, of watching other kids get adopted while I aged out of the system. And all along, my father had left me something. He'd tried to take care of me, even after death. Can I see them? I asked quietly. The buildings? Of course, Mayor Roberts said. In fact, I was hoping you'd let me give you a tour. 20 minutes later, I was in the mayor's car, driving through downtown Riverside with completely new eyes. She parked on Main Street, and we started walking. This is yours, she said, pointing to a 3-story brick building on the corner. The ground floor housed a coffee shop called Riverside Roasters, and I could see apartments on the upper floors. Your father bought this in 2005 for $40,000. It's worth about $350,000 now. We walked to the next block. The old theater, she said, gesturing to a beautiful Art Deco building with a marquee that read Riverside Cinema. Your father purchased it in 2008, right before the recession. Everyone thought he was crazy, but he saw potential. A local arts organization has been renting it for the past 6 years. They've completely restored the interior. Building after building, she showed me my father's legacy. The pharmacy building where a local bookstore now operated, the row of storefronts housing a bakery, a vintage clothing store, and a yoga studio. Each property represented my father's faith in this town and his determination to build something lasting. We ended at the largest building, a 4-story structure at the end of Main Street. This was his first purchase, Mayor Roberts said. He bought it in 2001 for $35,000 when it was completely run down. He spent years renovating it himself, doing the work on weekends and evenings. The ground floor is a restaurant now, and the upper floors are office space. This building alone is worth about $600,000. I stared up at it, imagining my father working on this building, probably dreaming about the day he could show it to me. He died when I was 6, which meant he'd only had 5 years to build this portfolio before the accident took him away. Why downtown? I asked. Why did he invest here? Mayor Roberts smiled. Your father believed in Riverside. He grew up here, and he saw what it could become. In the early 2000s, downtown was dying. Businesses were closing, buildings were empty, and everyone was shopping at the big box stores out by the highway. But Thomas had a vision. He knew that if enough people invested in downtown, if we could bring in the right mix of businesses, the town would come back to life. And he was right. Look around. This street is thriving now, and your father's properties were the foundation of that revival. What comes next is something I never saw coming. Stick with me and make sure you subscribe. The next few days were a blur of meetings with attorneys, accountants, and the property management company. Jennifer Walsh, the real estate attorney, turned out to be a patient woman in her 40s who specialized in handling inherited property. She explained everything in terms I could understand, never talking down to me or making me feel stupid for asking questions. Your father was incredibly smart about this, she told me during our first meeting. He structured everything to minimize taxes and maximize long-term value. The properties are held in a trust with you as the beneficiary, which protected them during the probate dispute. All the leases are solid, with good tenants who've been paying on time. You're in an excellent position, Maya. But excellent position didn't mean easy. I had decisions to make. Where would I live? What would I do with my life now that money wasn't the immediate concern? Did I keep the properties or sell them? Did I stay in Riverside or leave for somewhere bigger? The property management company offered me temporary housing in one of the apartments above Riverside Roasters while I figured things out. I accepted gratefully, moving from the group home into a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment with hardwood floors, tall windows, and a view of Main Street. It felt surreal, going from a shared room with institutional furniture to my own space that I could decorate however I wanted. But the apartment also felt empty in a way the group home never had. At least, there I'd had other kids around, even if we weren't close. Here, I was alone with my thoughts and the overwhelming weight of everything I'd inherited. I spent my first week just exploring, walking through downtown and watching how the businesses in my buildings operated. I introduced myself to the tenants, feeling awkward and unsure, but everyone was kind. The owner of Riverside Roasters, a woman named Beth in her 50s, even gave me free coffee and pastries every morning. Your father used to come by all the time when he was renovating these buildings, she told me one morning. He'd sit right there at that corner table, drinking coffee and making plans in his notebook. He talked about you constantly, how smart you were, how proud he was, how he was building all this for your future. He'd be so happy to know you're finally here. Her words made my chest ache. I'd been 6 when he died, and my memories of him were fragmented. The smell of motor oil and coffee, his laugh, deep and warm, the way he'd lift me onto his shoulders so I could see over crowds. But I didn't remember him talking about investments or building a future for me. I'd just been a kid who loved her dad. Jennifer suggested I enroll in community college to study business or real estate management. You don't have to decide your whole future right now, she said, but learning how to properly manage commercial property would serve you well, especially if you decide to keep these buildings long term. I took her advice, registering for fall classes at Riverside Community College. It gave me a goal, something to work toward beyond just existing. But the bigger question nagged at me. What about Richard Dawson, the man who'd stolen my inheritance and let me grow up in foster care while he profited from my father's work? Mayor Roberts had mentioned he was dead, but that didn't feel like enough justice. I asked Jennifer about it during one of our meetings. Did Richard's estate have to pay restitution? Did his family know what he did? She sighed. Richard died of a heart attack with significant debts. His estate was essentially insolvent. There's no money to recover, and legally, the return of the properties to you is considered sufficient remedy. As for his family, he had an ex-wife who'd been divorced from him for 10 years, and a son who hadn't spoken to him in 5. They both expressed shock and disgust when they learned what he'd done. It wasn't satisfying, but I supposed it was the best I'd get. Richard Dawson was gone, and I had my father's legacy back. That would have to be enough. One afternoon, about a month after moving into the apartment, I was walking past the old theater when a man in his 30s approached me. He had kind eyes and an easy smile, and he introduced himself as Marcus Reed, the director of Riverside Arts Collective, the organization renting the theater. "I've been hoping to meet you," he said. "Your father's theater has been our home for 6 years, and we're incredibly grateful. I wanted to talk to you about the future and make sure you understand how important this space is to our community." We ended up talking for over an hour. Marcus explained how the theater had become the cultural heart of downtown, hosting plays, concerts, movie nights, and art exhibitions. They'd invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in restoration, bringing the space back to its original 1920s glory. "We have a long-term lease through 2030, Marcus said. "But I wanted to meet you personally to put a face to the name on the deed. Your father took a chance on us when no one else would, He believed in what we were doing, and he gave us a space to grow. I hope you'll feel the same way. Looking at his passionate face, I realized something important. These buildings weren't just investments or sources of income. They were part of the community's fabric, providing space for businesses and organizations that made Riverside special. My father had understood that, and now I needed to understand it too. I'm not planning to make any changes, I told Marcus. I'm still figuring everything out, but I want to honor what my father built here. That includes supporting the Arts Collective and all the other tenants who've made these spaces work. His relief was visible. Thank you, Maya. That means more than you know. As fall approached and classes started, I settled into a routine. Mornings at Riverside Roasters with coffee and homework, classes 3 days a week, meetings with Jennifer and the property management company to learn the business side of ownership, and long walks through downtown, learning every detail of the properties my father had left me. I also started volunteering at Riverside Group Home, helping with the life skills classes and mentoring kids who were approaching 18. Mrs. Thompson was thrilled to have me back, and the kids seemed to respond well to someone who'd recently been in their shoes. "You're proof that things can work out," Mrs. Thompson told me one afternoon. "These kids need to see that. They need to know that aging out of the system isn't the end of possibilities." But I didn't feel like proof of anything. I felt lucky, blessed by a father who'd had the foresight to invest, and a mayor who'd fought to get me what was rightfully mine. How many other kids in the system had parents who'd left them something only to have it stolen by opportunistic adults? How many aged out with nothing because there was no one to advocate for them? That question haunted me, and it led to an idea. I called a meeting with Jennifer, Mayor Roberts, and an accountant named David Chen, who'd been helping me understand my finances. "I want to create a foundation," I told them, "something that helps kids aging out of foster care in Riverside and the surrounding counties. Housing assistance, education scholarships, job training, legal advocacy, all of it." Jennifer smiled. "That's a wonderful idea, Maya. And financially, you're in a position to make it happen. The rental income from your properties is approximately $7,000 per month after expenses. You could dedicate a portion of that to the foundation while still maintaining your own financial security." We spent weeks developing the concept. The Thomas Grant Foundation for Youth Independence, dedicated to helping foster kids transition successfully into adulthood. We'd provide housing assistance, education scholarships, legal services, and mentorship programs. The foundation would work with Riverside Group Home and other facilities in the region, identifying kids who needed support and resources. Mayor Roberts helped us navigate the legal requirements for establishing a nonprofit. David structured the finances to maximize the foundation's impact while ensuring I could sustain it long term. And Jennifer connected me with other attorneys who specialized in foster care advocacy, building a network of professionals willing to donate their time. 8 months after leaving Riverside Group Home with nothing but a duffel bag, I stood in one of my downtown buildings, surrounded by community members, local officials, and kids from the group home. We were celebrating the official launch of the Thomas Grant Foundation, and I was giving my first public speech. "My father died when I was 6 years old," I began, my voice shaky but growing stronger. He left me buildings and investments, a legacy he'd built to ensure I'd be okay. But someone stole that legacy, and I grew up in foster care thinking I had nothing and no one. I'm one of the lucky ones because eventually the truth came out, and I got back what my father left me. But there are thousands of kids who aren't that lucky. Kids who age out of the system with no resources, no support, and no safety net. This foundation exists to be that safety net, to honor my father's belief in investing in the future by investing in the young people of this community. The applause was overwhelming. Beth from Riverside Roasters was crying. Mrs. Thompson was beaming with pride, and several kids from the group home were looking at me like I'd just shown them what was possible. After the ceremony, a girl named Sophie approached me. She was 17, quiet and serious, with eyes that held too much pain for someone so young. "Do you really mean it?" she asked, "that the foundation will help kids like us?" "I really mean it," I told her. "What do you need, Sophie?" She looked down at her feet. "I want to go to college, but I don't know how to apply or pay for it. And I don't have anywhere to live after I turn 18 next summer. I'm scared." My heart broke for her because I remembered that fear so clearly. "The foundation will help you with all of that," I said. "We'll help you apply to colleges, fill out financial aid forms, and find scholarships. And we have emergency housing funds for kids who need a safe place to land. You're not going to face this alone, Sophie. I promise." She hugged me then, holding on tight, and I realized this was why everything had happened. My father's investments, Richard's theft, the mayor's investigation, all of it had led to this moment where I could use what I'd been given to help others. Over the next year, the foundation grew beyond my expectations. We helped 32 kids in our first year, providing housing, education support, and job training. We partnered with local businesses to create internship programs, giving foster kids work experience and professional references. We established a legal clinic that helped kids navigate the complicated process of aging out, ensuring they had proper identification, bank accounts, and life skills. Sophie became one of our first success stories. With the foundation's help, she got into a state university with a full scholarship, and we provided her with a laptop and textbooks. She called me every few weeks with updates, her voice filled with excitement about her classes and new experiences. But the foundation wasn't just about giving money or resources. It was about showing kids that they mattered, that someone believed in them, that they had potential beyond what the system had told them. That was the real gift my father had left me. Not the buildings or the money, but the ability to invest in other people's futures the way he'd invested in mine. I kept living in the apartment above Riverside Roasters, though I could have afforded something much larger. The space felt right, connected to downtown and the community my father had believed in. I decorated it with photographs of him that I'd found in storage, surrounding myself with his memory. On the anniversary of my first day out of foster care, I visited his grave for the first time since the funeral I barely remembered. The cemetery was quiet, peaceful, with old trees providing shade over weathered headstones. I sat beside his grave and told him everything about the buildings, the foundation, the kids we were helping, about how scared I'd been and how grateful I was for what he'd built, about how I wished I'd known him better, had more memories, more time. I'm trying to make you proud, I said to the silent stone. I'm trying to use what you left me to help others the way you would have wanted. I hope that's enough. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment I could almost hear his voice telling me it was more than enough, that I was exactly who he'd hoped I'd become. 2 years after leaving the group home, I stood on the roof of the old theater building, looking out over downtown Riverside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, and Main Street below was alive with people walking between shops and restaurants. Every building I could see represented a piece of my father's vision, a bet he'd made on this town's future. The foundation had grown to serve 5 counties, helping over 100 kids each year. We'd established partnerships with colleges, trade schools, and employers throughout the region. And we'd started a mentorship program pairing successful adults with foster kids, giving them role models and advocates. I'd finished my associate degree and was working toward a bachelor's in business administration. Jennifer had taken me under her wing, teaching me the intricacies of real estate law and property management. I was learning to be more than just an owner. I was becoming a steward of my father's legacy and an advocate for kids who needed someone in their corner. Beth from Riverside Roasters had become like a surrogate mother, inviting me to family dinners and checking in on me constantly. Marcus from the Arts Collective had become a friend, introducing me to theater and art in ways I'd never experienced. And Mayor Roberts continued to mentor me, sharing her knowledge of community development and civic responsibility. I wasn't alone anymore. I had a community, a purpose, and a future that felt meaningful. The buildings my father left me would continue generating income for decades, providing financial security and funding for the foundation. But his real gift was showing me that investing in your community, believing in its potential, and building something lasting was the truest form of legacy. I pulled out my phone and looked at the photo I kept as my lock screen, my father and me when I was 5 years old. We were standing in front of the theater building, and he was pointing up at it with a huge smile. I was on his shoulders, laughing, both of us full of hope for the future. "We did it, Dad," I whispered. "We built something that matters." Thank you so much for listening to my story. If it touched you, please subscribe to the channel. It means everything and helps us share more stories of hope and resilience. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever discovered something about a family member that changed how you saw them? Or maybe you've been given a second chance when things seemed hopeless. Share your story with our community and check out one of the 2 stories on your screen right now. Trust me, you won't regret it. Until next time, remember that your legacy isn't about what you leave behind. It's about what you build for others.